Introduction. Due to the many phases of destruction that Babylon faced throughout its long and deep history, the Hanging Gardens probably represent one of the most challenging undertakings for archaeologists and excavators. However, this is not the case with historians. This position, according to some scholars, is not clear to archaeologists because we have not yet obtained conclusive indications concerning those gardens' upper stories designs. What makes this matter more intricate is that the classic historians had mixed up the Babylonian ziggurat, the stepped Temen and Key Tower, with the smaller Babylonian three-story stepped structure planted with trees and gardens. The ruins of that unique building and its wheels were discovered in the northeastern area of the southern palace of Nebuchadnezzar II. The geometrical engineering principle implemented in building those gardens is the congruent sides of the triangle inscribed on a tablet uncovered in Shah Dupumki in Baghdad. This principle is derived initially from the axiom that all right angles are equal. A right corner is formed when two lines intersect each other perpendicularly. This postulate was known in Mesopotamia 17 centuries before Euclid's axiom of the 3rd century BC. Since modern time scholars do not yet have clear-cut evidence advocating classical statements about the Hanging Gardens, we are left with no other choice but to consider the 1899 to 1917, 1978 to 1979 unearthed three-story structure as an objective substitute for those spectacular gardens around which so many Greek tales were contrived. When Koldewey excavated that structure's foundations in 1899 to 1917, he had no idea why it was built or its primary function, thus he called it the House of Cellars. It consists of 14 domed hallways surrounded by an unusually thick wall. There were also wells with water-raising mechanisms not known before in ancient Mesopotamia. Those wells were connected by outlets forming the base for a hydraulic lift system with a chain pump, complected mechanism. Accordingly, Koldewey announced in 1913 that structure was the renowned Hanging Gardens based on what was mentioned in the writings of classical historians that the Hanging Gardens were built above a multi-cellar structure. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were in Babylon. Refuting Stephanie Dalley's misconception. Around 1857 AD, and despite a lack of tangible evidence and limited discoveries on the one hand, and on the other hand, the dissatisfaction of many French, German, and other European scholars, the British Royal Asiatic Society, RAS, decided the name Assyriology was an accurate term. The British RAS scholars claimed that the cuneiform tablets that later discovered in Nineveh, the ancient capital of Assur from the period 668 to 627 BC, is the most ancient Mesopotamian writing system. However, in less than 20 years, thousands of tablets were collected from all over the Middle East. These tablets were inscribed with cuneiform Mesopotamian pictograph signs, not only 200 or 300 years older than the ones discovered in Nineveh, but more than 2,000 years, and in some cases more than 3,000 years older, especially the tablets that were discovered in the Babylonian region, i.e., Kish, Eridu, Shuruppak, Lagash, Nippur, Ur, and Uruk. Some European scholars suggested revisiting the term Assyriology and proposed other terms, including cuneiformiology and Mesopotamiology. This intention to right the wrongdoing by the British Royal Asiatic Society was what made Samuel Noah Kramer suggest the name Sumeriology in the first half of the 20th century. However, the British Royal Asiatic Society's members ignored all the European scholars' suggestions and insisted on using the wrong term, claiming there was no need to change what was in use worldwide for more than 2 decades. British experts' arrogance and the government's political ambitions forced the use of an inaccurate scientific term, no more and no less. Once again, the same course of conceit, pursuing fame, and other improper factors were behind the new inappropriate misleading claims suggesting another location for the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the ancient world's 7 wonders. Stephanie Mary Daly FSA, née Page, March 1943, is another British scholar of the ancient Near East. She retired as a research fellow from Oxford Oriental Institute. Daly became known for her so-called investigation into the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and her naive and incorrect proposal, which will be exposed and refuted in this documentary. However, before presenting and refuting Daly's misconception concerning the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that if this kind of irresponsible proposition is not confronted and stopped in time, it would result in more absurd views and more ridiculous ideas, like the ones included in the book titled The City of Babylon by no other than Stephanie Daly, which was published in June 2021 by Cambridge University Press. Below is a link to one of her interviews concerning the book, https://www.youtube.com/. V=23TXSJXVMBC webinar, Dr. Stephanie Daly on the City of Babylon from c. 2000 BC to 116 AD. Daly might be very good at deciphering cuneiform script, which means that she might be a good linguist. However, the Iraqi National Museum and the schools of archaeology all over Iraq have tens and tens of cuneiform decipherers, philologists who might be more credible than her. It is a proven fact that someone might be the best philologist, but that does not make Hiva a great poet or novelist. Furthermore, the most important fact here is that Daly never trained as an archaeologist at Mesopotamian historical sites, compared to the renowned Sir Leonard Woolley, Hans Baumann, Georges Roux, Joe Notes, H. W.F. Saggs, Fawzi Rashid, Fritz Kruskun, Bahija Khalil Ismail, Benno Landsberger, Samuel Noah Kramer, and other iconic historians archaeologists. She is just an average philologist. In fact, her Mesopotamian knowledge in the field of archaeology does not exceed her 1962 visit to Iraq when she was a teenager, accompanied by David Oates, a family friend, when he was directing an expedition in Nimrud, northern Iraq, as well as working for 1 year between 1966 and 1967 at Tel El-Rim as epigrapher, decipher philologist. Daly's main problem is that every time she makes a statement, she presents a new falsified, presumptive idea, comes up with more problems than solutions, and sounds like she is purposely shooting her own foot. For example, at minute 38:08 of the above-mentioned video, she states out of the blue concerning the famous Lion of Babylon, it is a symbol of Assyrian royalty, which is no more than an irresponsible and absurd statement. Ironically, Daly built her entire hypothetical conclusion based on a fairy tale. Daly falsely hypothesized about an Assyrian booty relic of a 4-inch tall ivory plaque depicting Ethiopian or Nubian art, which was dumped in a well 70 feet deep among other ivories around 705 BC at Shalmaneser Fortress in Kalku, almost 25 years before Esarhaddon assumed the throne in Nineveh. The Lion of Babylon is a finished common sculpture similar in its style and technique to many lion sculptures from Eridu to Jumdet-Nasr periods. You can learn about the lioness ivory ornament and other non-Mesopotamian ivory booties by reading the compelling illustrated book, Assyria, written by André Perret. Dali's fictitious story concerning the Lion of Babylon was made up to justify her baseless, confused points concerning this Babylonian national symbol. Her shallow story is the most ridiculous claim to the point that not even beginner historians, no matter how hard they try, can swallow. For example, if the final destination of the statue was Babylon, then why would Esarhaddon have the statue carved in Egypt and then transported when it was unfinished through an endless desert to Babylon? Why would Esarhaddon decide to carve the lion in Egypt on basalt stone when limestone and sandstone were the main stones of ancient Egypt? Why would Esarhaddon use Egyptian basalt when Hatti was one of the main basalt resources closest to Mesopotamia since the 6th millennium BC? Why would Esarhaddon, on his way back to Mesopotamia, go to Babylon and leave the lion there, when the Euphrates route is closer to Esarhaddon's capital Nineveh? How could Dali claim that Esarhaddon and his mother murdered Sennacherib to justify the unfinished work of the statue when both historical and biblical records state otherwise? In fact, any beginner historian who specializes in Mesopotamia knows that Artamaldishu and the other brother, Nebuchadnezzar, murdered their father, Sennacherib, in 681. If she considers herself a historian, then why did Dali not know that according to all the reliable historical records, Esarhaddon, the legitimate heir, avenged his father by defeating his brothers in a famous 6-week-long civil war? There is not one Mesopotamian tablet or record connecting Assyria or Esarhaddon to the Lion of Babylon. Yet out of the blue, Dali did not hesitate to sell her fictional and false claim concerning the Lion of Babylon that is considered one of the major Chaldean Babylonian national symbols. Finally, there is no historical record whatsoever concerning the carving period of the Lion of Babylon, although a few historians believe it goes back to the Old Babylonian period. The lack of definite resources concerning the carving time of the statue also applies to the other Babylonian famous lions, for example, the Lion of Eridu as well as the lions of Shadupam. All we know is that these statues are considered a Proto-Chaldees common style. See Chaldean Legacy, pages 45 to 51. Conclusion. Questioning the fictitious story of Dali's presumption concerning Esarhaddon and the Lion of Babylon can tell a lot about Dali's poor Mesopotamian knowledge as well as her questionable character. Quite frankly, I am shocked at how could any decent professional archaeologist or credible historian specialized in Mesopotamia would give Dali a platform to spread deceptions or even a pass for such nonsense. Refuting Stephanie's Dali's misconception. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were in Babylon. Back to the main subject, Dali suggested that the Hanging Gardens building was not situated in Babylon and was not built by Nebuchadnezzar II. These claims were made according to her feeble speculations in Nineveh and construction during Sennacherib's reign. Since Dali published her misleading theory of the Hanging Gardens and attributed them to the wrong place, time, and king, some incompetent content creators on social media have produced videos and articles supporting her inconsistent theory. Unfortunately, tens of papers and videos followed her deceptive path like sheep and out of ignorance on one hand, and on the other hand, the excitement of the so-called cracking of a long-known mystery sponsored by Oxford University and surprisingly the British Museum. Her theory is mainly based on manipulating historical records and fabricating alternative narratives that the Mesopotamian historical and geographic facts could easily refute. 1. Dali intentionally planned on confusing readers concerning the image of the Assyrian gardens between Sennacherib 705 to 681 BC. which he has nothing to do with the garden's image and the in-ground garden bed of Ashurbanipal 669 to 631 BC. She also claims that Sennacherib loved Babylon when in fact he destroyed Babylon and razed the greatest city of the ancient world to the ground. Ashurbanipal, the grandson of Sennacherib, was not less brutal than his grandfather. Ashurbanipal is known for burning Babylon down and looting its massive libraries and other Babylonian cities' tablet archives. The largest known today is Ashurbanipal Library. It is also worth noting that the Ashurbanipal Library is not the oldest Mesopotamian library as claimed by many incompetent resources compared to the oldest ones discovered in the Babylonian region. For example, Uruk, Sippar, Lagash, Nippur, Dur-Kurugulzu, and Shadupam. The below excerpt from Sennacherib's record can easily expose such an untrustworthy statement made by Dali claiming Sennacherib loved Babylon. As a hurricane proceeds, I attacked it, Babylon, and, like a storm, I overthrew it, its inhabitants, young and old. El did not spare, and with their corpses I filled the streets of the city, the town itself and its houses. From their foundations to their roofs I devastated, I destroyed, by fire I overthrew, in order that in future even the soil of its temples be forgotten. By water I ravaged it, I turned it into pastures, to quiet the heart of Ashur, my lord, that people should bow in submission before his exalted might. I removed the dust of Babylon for presents to the most distant peoples, and in that temple of the New Year festival, in Assur, I stored up some in a covered jar. George Isru, Ancient Iraq, pages 322 to 323. 2. Dali's shallow knowledge concerning Mesopotamian art and architecture led her to be confused between Sennacherib 705 to 681 BC, who established a water canal, or aqueduct, which was a traditional system in ancient Iraq, and a mural bas-relief in the Ashurbanipal palace, ignoring the fact that Mesopotamian artists did not rely on a three-dimensional view in their murals. This technique is also known as the vanishing point, used by Italian artists during the Renaissance circa 1300 AD, almost 2,000 years after the death of Sennacherib. However, the engraved mural used the common Mesopotamian layer technique. It merely depicts distances and not heights. Dali admits at minute 1 hours and 37 seconds of her interview on the YouTube link below that the German archaeologist Robert Koldewey had found 2 wells and a very interesting water-raising mechanism by the building that Koldewey called the House of Cellars, and the Iraqi archaeologists call the vaulted structures, aka the Hanging Gardens, in the 1978 Academic Journal of Archaeology, Volume 36, 1978. Number 1-2, pages 127 to 136. However, she intentionally dodges these scientific facts: the wells, the complicated water-raising mechanism, and the building that was built upon vaulted structures according to the classical historians, by foolishly stating that it's way away from anywhere that you could bring water from. https www.youtube.com watch v equals 23 txsjxvm. What proves her intentional manipulation of the truth and the misleading proposition is that she claims that to water the gardens you would have to get it, the water, through all sorts of walls of palaces and fortifications. This is an insane claim, simply because Dali not only ignored the 2 discovered wells by the gardens building but also ignored, or maybe was not even aware, that the major Babylonian canal Labil Kigala cut through the old city almost 30 meters from Nebuchadnezzar's palace, the Hanging Gardens. On top of that, Dali purposely ignored or concealed the fact that the Euphrates River is only 400 meters from the garden building. Any layman could easily figure out that the 2 wells by the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Labil Kigala Canal, and even the Euphrates River, disprove Dali's unreliable statement. It's the Hanging Gardens, way away from anywhere that you could bring water from. As a matter of fact, the 2 wells, The Labil-Kigala Canal and the Euphrates River are much closer and more accurate to watering the gardens than bringing water from the distant Gomo River through the 80-kilometer, almost 50 miles, of the Jerwin Aqueduct. On the other hand, one of her so-called strong points that prove the gardens were built in Nineveh is Sennacherib's water canal, aka Jerwin Aqueduct, which has its water source starting at Kini's monumental complex. Daly's supposition suggests that it is fine for Sennacherib to bring water from the Kinis located in Bavion, Duhok Governorate through the Jerwin Aqueduct north of Mosul in the Nineveh province of modern Iraq to water the gardens of Sennacherib's palace located in Nineveh, 80 kilometers almost 50 miles from Khan's water source located on the right-hand side of the Gomo River. However, according to Daly's illogical reasoning, it is not fine for Nebuchadnezzar to water his hanging gardens from the shortest distance of 3 meters of the two wells, 300 meters of Labil-Kigala Canal, and 400 meters of Euphrates River. To those who are unaware of the above-mentioned historical geographical facts, the Jerwin Aqueduct was dug during the time of Sennacherib to redirect the Gomo River, and the canal to be used to bring sweet water to his capital city and the surrounding areas. This whole project covers an area of over 3,500 square meters located in northern Mesopotamia, between the Nineveh plain of Mosul and the modern-day Duhok province, and has nothing to do with watering Daly's fictitious hanging gardens. 4. More importantly, any simple peasant from the Nineveh plain who relies on rainfall uses rained agriculture for farming knows that there is no need to invent complex irrigation technology. All water wheels for irrigation have been used in central and southern Iraq, not in the north, which sustains its agriculture through rainfall and not through irrigation. 5. Concerning Stephanie Daly, Archimedes' screw and the date palm tree of Babylon, all I can say is that it's just another supposition because Daly has once again built her entire wrongful theory on one uncommon palm tree trunk when every Iraqi knows that the real date palm trunk looks totally different as shown in the accompanying slide. Daly, who is not native to Mesopotamia, does not even know that there are 622 registered Iraqi date palm species. As kids, we used to climb them knowing exactly where to put our small feet to fit the spaces in the trunk. Nothing in the Iraqi date palm looks like Archimedes' screw, and even the odd one Daly used has mainly horizontal shaped lines besides somewhat a couple of odd oblique angles. The accompanied slide depicts ancient and modern date palm trunks, and none looks like the one Daly used to create her fictitious claim. Plus, whoever did the sketch has purposely manipulated the actual shape and diagonal the horizontal lines to fit Daly's unfounded theory. However, our enclosed illustration proves beyond doubt that Daly is wrong. Babylonians were the masters of math, geometry, and science, which led them to invent the water clock and water lifting mechanism way before Sennacherib's time. More importantly, there is not one tangible discovery, tablet or engraved work, that connects Archimedes' screw to Daly's imaginary Sennacherib watering mechanism theory or showing in the in-ground garden bed of Ashurbanipal. 6. Berossus, Bel-Riyushu, was falsely smeared and accused by Daly, who stated that for political reasons, Berossus had attributed the hanging gardens to Babylon. Daly also out of overconfidence judged and dismissed the hard work of prominent German, French, American, and native Iraqi archaeologists in a very disrespectful way, claiming that there was a desperation to find them, the hanging gardens, in Babylon, and they couldn't. Such character assassination and biased allegations ignore the fact that Berossus was one of the essential Babylonian intellectuals during the Hellenistic era and that he is a native Babylonian who knew firsthand every single detail of Babylon. Coldwell's in-depth excavations in Babylon and position concerning the hanging gardens of Babylon location is quite superior compared to Daly's short visit and baseless proposition. Furthermore, Daly's mocking Berossus and Coldwell and smearing of Berossus tells a lot about Daly's character. especially for those who do not know that Berossus was, as stated, a native Babylonian who taught the Greeks philosophy, math, and science at Kos Island, where they installed an impressive statue of him out of appreciation and admiration. Such remarkable status does not apply to Dali, who practically proved that her knowledge concerning Babylon is below poor. Berossus was the main source for classical historians in confirming the biblical narrative of the Tower of Babel. However, many secular scholars thought the tower was a fictional story made up for a spiritual cause. Other scholars doubted the foundations of the tower that was discovered by the Germans during Koldewey's excavations in Babylon from March 26, 1899, to March 11, 1917. This matter continued to be somewhat controversial up until the two fragments of black stone making up the Tower of Babylon, stele with pictures of the ziggurat in Babylon, the tower, and King Nebuchadnezzar II were found near the E-Sagila temple. Berossus was correct, and those who doubted him were wrong. This fact also applies to the Hanging Gardens and Koldewey's excavations in Babylon. 6. Some British historians try to give explanations far from reality about the writings of Flavius Josephus, 37 AD, Diodorus Siculus, c. 45 BC, and other scholars who wrote about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon on the pretext that they were talking about the Ashurbanipal bas-relief mural discovered circa 1846 AD. Such an irresponsible explanation ignores the fact that none of the classical historians were aware of the Ashurbanipal bas-relief mural that was buried and forgotten for over 600 years before their time. Dali and those who are supporting her misleading theory, for unknown reasons, also ignored the fact that Nineveh, the Assyrian last capital, at that time was no longer in existence after centuries of destruction. So how could the classical historians talk about a bas-relief that they are not even aware of? On the other hand, German, French, American, Russian, and Iraqi archaeologists and historians, for example, Dr. Bahija Khalil Ismail, Dr. Fauzi Rashid, and Bashir Yusuf Francis have unquestionably confirmed that the unique refrigerator building of Babel discovered at Nebuchadnezzar II's palace is the most likely site for the Hanging Gardens. To learn about this subject, read Chaldean Legacy, pages 155 to 159. 7. Dali argues that Nebuchadnezzar II's records did not mention the Hanging Gardens, ignoring the fact that we have not found most of Nebuchadnezzar II's records and those of many other great Babylonian kings. The flooding of Babylon twice by Sennacherib and Ashurbanipal, who also burned the city to the ground, the Euphrates River's diversion in the Cyrus era, the 482 BC vast destruction of Artaxerxes, and the vast destruction of Nebuchadnezzar Palace with dynamite in 1889 by the Ottomans erased the history of thousands of years, including countless records of Nebuchadnezzar II. In 521 BC, the Babylonians appointed their king, Nebuchadnezzar IV, and the city rebelled. Darius's gigantic army defeated the rebel army and captured Babylon. The Persians destroyed Babylon's defenses, pulled down all the city gates, and burned its landmarks and libraries, and the Chaldean king and his inner circle of warriors and leading followers were impaled inside the city 82 BC. Babylon revolted in September against the Achaemenid Empire's occupation, killing Zopyrus the Persian ruler, and defeating Ahasuerus Xerxes' Persian army. The brutal king sent an enormous army under his brother-in-law Megabyzus' command to capture the city at the beginning of October. The Persian military destroyed the temples and took away the idol of the Babylonian god Marduk, burning the glorious Chaldean capital and its main structures, including schools and libraries. Once again, over 3,000 leading Chaldean revolutionists were impaled inside the city around October 6, 482 BC. The question here is, how many of Nebuchadnezzar II's records were either destroyed or buried and hidden to this day to survive those massive waves of destruction? 8. Mesopotamian civilization, especially the Babylonian region, was built with clay, as most of the buildings and temples were constructed of mud brick. However, the important temples and palaces were made of fired bricks. The fired bricks proved to be the most suitable materials to stand for thousands of years. However, the laughable point is that Delhi, who is an alien to the land and its environment, has ignored this fact and intentionally mocked the Babylonian builders by making jokes about planting trees on top of brick-made structures, which according to her naive view would be absolute disastrous. Her discreditable point was made to convince her unaware readers that bricks are insufficient construction materials, which also makes them accept her misleading theory. However, the joke is on Delhi, because it seems she either did not tell the truth to her readers or she is not aware of the common basic technique used to build temples, ziggurats, and palaces in the Babylonian region. The fired brick technique allowed the Mesopotamian builders to maintain adequate room temperature and create massive arches and domes, which also survived for over 7,000 years. The brilliant Mesopotamian builders also used isolating layers mixed with asphalt. This unique technique was studied and explained in detail by many scholars, non-Iraqis and Iraqis, including my professor Dr. Fauzi Rashid in his 1991 book, Nebuchadnezzar II. The fired brick technique was also mentioned in many studies published in Sumer, the official academic journal of archaeology and history, published by the State Organization of Antiquities and Heritage, Baghdad since 1945. Planting trees and other plants played a significant role in these buildings for two major purposes: aesthetic and functional. More technical details are available in the book titled Chaldean Legacy, pages 155 to 159. Finally, it is worth mentioning that planting trees on the Babylonian palace roofs is common in Sumer and Akkad, a traditional practice still used in Baghdad and other provinces nowadays. Unlike Nineveh, which is already famous for its natural forests and colder weather, any ordinary observer could quickly figure out that Sennacherib, or the Jerwan Canal's only purpose was to provide sweet water for the palace and the surrounding areas. Trees surrounded Ashurbanipals, some in front, and others at a distance or near it, but there was not a single tree on the palace's roof. Those who have visited the area can easily confirm that the canal was not built to plant trees. The landscape around it, front and behind, is full of plants and trees. However, there is not one tree hanging on the roof of the palace or the aqueduct. When it comes to highly regarded and fair-minded Mesopotamiologists, for example, Sir Leonard Woolley, Seton Lloyd, Joe Notes, and Irving Finkel, I tip my hat in respect. However, it seems that there are some so-called academics still thinking that they are living in the British colonial era, and therefore they are entitled to be superior to other German, French, American, and even native Iraqi archaeologists who know their native land like the back of their palms. Unfortunately, such an unrealistic illusion would allow those of colonial mentality to suggest whatever they like, thinking that the rest of the world will follow. The fact of the matter is that every single speculation that Delhi came up with, whether concerning the Lion of Babylon or the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, is historically inaccurate and scientifically false, baseless, shallow, and naive. In fact, Delhi is not utterly wrong, but her inappropriate, groundless theories are stone dead. Thank you so much for watching. If you find this video useful, like and subscribe to the Mesopotamian Knowledge channel for more content soon. Thanks a lot and hope to catch up with you shortly. you.